At 6, Tim Duncan's former financial advisor is facing criminal and civil charges over his dealings with the former Spur.
Charles Banks is already being sued by Duncan. Now, some of those allegations are the basis for both a federal indictment and a civil complaint filed by the Securities Exchange Commission.
And another technical foul. And this is when Duncan's out of the game. He's thrown Duncan out of the game. Which is an automatic ejection. As we've been showing you, Duncan's been laughing. Maybe Crawford felt he was showing him up by constantly laughing.
Boring. That's the word everyone used to describe Tim Duncan for 19 years. The big fundamental, the quiet superstar who wore oversized flannel shirts and never celebrated a dunk. 5 championships, 2 MVP awards, and 0 scandals. He was the robot, the machine, the guy who cared more about tax returns than headlines. While Kobe Bryant and Allen Iverson dominated tabloids, Duncan just played basketball and went home. But here's the truth nobody wanted to tell you. Tim Duncan wasn't boring. He was surviving. Behind that blank face was a man fighting battles most people couldn't imagine. A $20 million betrayal by his best friend. A brutal divorce filled with private investigators and false rumors during an NBA Finals run. And a bizarre internet confusion that made people think he was dead. The scandal of Tim Duncan isn't that he did something wrong. It's that he endured everything wrong and never broke. If you respect that kind of quiet strength, hit hype right now. This is the real story of greatness nobody saw coming. For nearly 2 decades, Tim Duncan was the punchline of every boring athlete joke. The Onion, the satirical news site, found its most reliable muse in the Spurs' power forward. They wrote headlines like, "Tim Duncan fires up teammates with calm 3-hour pep talk," and "Tim Duncan constructs new content management system for NBA.com on road trip." People laughed because it felt spiritually true. He was the superstar who took a pay cut to keep the team together. The legend who never demanded a trade or criticized a teammate publicly. The world saw a blank canvas. What they didn't see was the fortress. Duncan built that boring image on purpose. It was protective coloration. It allowed him to operate in the shadows of the spotlight. While fans joked about his excitement over fiscal responsibility, Duncan was privately navigating a financial crime that would destroy most people. His closest confidant had stolen $20 million. His marriage was falling apart with tabloids spreading lies. And somehow, through all of it, he kept playing championship basketball. That's not boring. That's survival. The betrayal started with friendship. Charles Banks wasn't just Tim Duncan's financial advisor. He was a friend. They shared meals. Their families knew each other. Banks had worked with Duncan's investment firm for years, building trust slowly and carefully. Duncan said later in court that he had built a trusting relationship with Banks. He had originally set up checks and balances to protect his assets, a group of individuals and companies that would keep eyes on each other. But as members of that group moved on over the years, Banks remained. He consolidated his power. He became the one person Duncan trusted most. And that's when the crime began. Banks promoted a company called Game Day Entertainment. It was a sports merchandise and hospitality company. On paper, it looked promising and legitimate. Behind the scenes, it was collapsing. The company was hemorrhaging cash and on the brink of complete dissolution. Banks needed money fast. Not to save the company, but to cover his own mistakes and pay himself. So he turned to the one person with deep pockets and deeper trust. Tim Duncan. Duncan already had a $7.5 million loan extended to Game Day. Then Banks came with a new proposal. He told Duncan to guarantee a $6 million loan with Comerica Bank. Banks promised this would actually reduce Duncan's exposure by $1.5 million. He said Game Day was doing great. His exact words were crushing it. Duncan believed him. Why wouldn't he? This was his friend, his trusted advisor for years, so Duncan guaranteed the loan. But everything Banks said was a lie. Game Day was hemorrhaging cash. Banks didn't need the loan to protect Duncan's investment. He needed it to pay himself. Court documents revealed that Banks paid himself over $1.5 million in fees from that loan. He used Duncan's perfect credit rating and liquid capital to prop up a failing business while stealing money directly into his own pockets. When Game Day eventually collapsed, Duncan's original loan went into complete default. The $6 million guarantee got triggered. Duncan's total losses from the specific charges were calculated at $13.5 million. But Duncan estimated his total losses across the entire relationship exceeded $20 million. The The crime unraveled in 2013. Duncan tried to access his capital and found it blocked. The funds were gone. That discovery triggered a federal investigation. Banks was indicted on 2 counts of wire fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. That crushing it text became infamous during the trial. When Banks's lawyers tried to claim it was just optimism, the judge mocked them. U.S. District Judge Fred Beery called it what they call nowadays alternative facts. The courtroom knew what it was, a calculated lie to steal from a friend. The most revealing moment came when Duncan gave his victim impact statement. For a man who spent his career saying almost nothing publicly, his words were brutally honest. He didn't ask for sympathy about the money. Duncan earned over $240 million in his career. $20 million wouldn't bankrupt him, but the betrayal cut deeper than dollars. It attacked his identity and his pride. Duncan said, "I also prided myself on not being the stereotypical dumb athlete that can easily be taken advantage of. I'm the poster child for the dumb athlete whose financial advisor took his money. I hate it and am embarrassed by it more than you can imagine." Think about that. Tim Duncan, one of the smartest players in NBA history, felt like a fool. Not because he was dumb, but because he trusted. He had done everything right. Built systems, hired professionals, stayed humble and cautious, and still got victimized. He begged the judge not to send a message that nothing bad happens when you get caught the first time. He said if a poor kid from a rough neighborhood stole far less, he would go to jail for many years. Duncan wasn't asking for revenge. He was asking for justice, for fairness in a system that often favors the wealthy and connected. And he got it. The courtroom was packed. Manu Ginobili was there. Kevin Garnett showed up. Coach Greg Popovich sat in support. In June 2017, Charles Banks was sentenced to 48 months in federal prison. He was ordered to pay $7.5 million in restitution. The sentence was a victory, but the money was gone. The trust was shattered. Even in that pain, Duncan showed grace. He testified without bitterness. That's strength. While Duncan was fighting his financial betrayal, his personal life was collapsing too. In March 2013, his wife Amy filed for divorce. The timing couldn't have been worse. The Spurs were heading into the playoffs. Duncan was chasing his 5th championship. And suddenly, his marriage of 12 years was ending. For over a decade, Tim and Amy Duncan were viewed as the model NBA couple. Married in 2001, 2 children. They maintained a low profile consistent with the Spurs culture. The filing became public in May as the Spurs were advancing toward the NBA Finals against Miami. While Duncan was battling LeBron James on the court, his lawyers were battling to keep the divorce details sealed. The marriage had become insupportable due to conflict and discord, according to the legal filing. But the reality was far messier. Duncan didn't sit back quietly. He hired a private investigator named Robert Pizzurro. For a man known for passivity, this was a radical move. The investigation focused on a San Antonio personal trainer named Gilbert Urbano Jr. Duncan's legal team wanted information about Urbano's relationship with Amy. They even requested a court order barring the trainer from being around the Duncan children. You don't hire a private investigator and target someone in divorce filings without evidence. Duncan believed something happened. This wasn't a conscious uncoupling. This was a legal offensive designed to protect his kids and his assets. Then the rumors started. As Duncan's team pushed the infidelity angle, someone fought back. A tabloid site published a story claiming Duncan was bisexual. The report alleged Duncan had been in a relationship with a male friend since college, that this friend had lived with the couple, that Duncan was buying his silence. The allegations were explosive. This was 2013. The sports world was still deeply homophobic. An allegation like this could destroy a career. But the timing gave it away. This wasn't a revelation. This was a weapon. If you expose my affair, I'll expose your secret life. It was a calculated smear campaign. Duncan never responded. Not once. He didn't issue a denial. His silence was his answer. His teammates spoke for him. Danny Green dismissed the rumors completely. Green said, "Timmy is Tim. I'm not going to look at him any differently. But he's going through some stuff. That's what happens when you're going through a divorce. And sometimes it gets ugly." The NBA fraternity knew what this was. Collateral damage. Not truth, just tactics. In August 2013, the divorce was finalized, but not in a normal courtroom. Duncan's legal team pulled off something remarkable. They convinced the judge to hold the hearing at Duncan's attorney's private office instead of the courthouse. Paparazzi were camped outside the courthouse waiting. They never got their story. The hearing happened in secret. The terms were sealed. There was no public testimony about the personal trainer, no cross-examination about the allegations, no airing of dirty laundry. Duncan suffocated the scandal by taking it into the shadows. That's the privacy premium of being ultra wealthy, and Duncan used it perfectly. Even after retirement, Tim Duncan couldn't escape confusion. The recurring belief that Tim Duncan is dead comes from something darker. A tragic case of mistaken identity with a serial killer. Joseph Edward Duncan III was a federal death row inmate whose crimes were horrific. He was convicted for the 2005 kidnapping and murder of the Growing family in Idaho. The names Duncan and death became linked in search algorithms. On March 28, 2021, Joseph Edward Duncan III died of brain cancer while on death row. News outlets reported serial killer Duncan dies and Duncan dead on death row. Social media stripped away the nuance. Suddenly, Duncan dead was trending globally on Twitter. NBA fans saw Duncan and dead together with breaking news. The immediate association was Tim Duncan. And here's the problem. Tim Duncan has zero social media presence. No Twitter, no Instagram. He couldn't post an "I'm alive" selfie, so the rumors festered. Sports journalists and former teammates had to clarify that the Duncan in the news was the serial killer, not the power forward. But there's another reason the death hoax sticks. Duncan is reclusive. He rarely gives interviews. Long periods of silence are normal for him. So when clickbait sites generate spam death hoaxes, it's harder for fans to verify he's okay. His silence, which protected him during his career, now makes false rumors more believable. But it's a price Duncan seems willing to pay. He values peace over presence. And if that means people occasionally think he's dead, so be it. He's alive. He's just living quietly. In 19 years, Tim Duncan was ejected only a handful of times. But his ejection on April 15th, 2007 remains the most absurd controversy in NBA history. His crime? Laughing. The Spurs were playing the Mavericks. Referee Joey Crawford was officiating. Crawford was known for his short fuse. In the third quarter, Duncan was called for an offensive foul. He went to the bench. While sitting there, Duncan was laughing and smiling, probably in disbelief at the calls. Crawford saw this as a personal insult. He hit Duncan with a technical foul. Minutes later, Duncan continued to chuckle while talking to teammates, still sitting on the bench. Crawford blew his whistle again. Second technical foul, automatic ejection. A player ejected for laughing while sitting on the bench. Duncan's face registered genuine shock. The real controversy came in the post-game interviews. Duncan revealed something shocking. He claimed Crawford had threatened him. Duncan told reporters, "He looked at me and said, 'Do you want to fight? Do you want to fight? If he wants to fight, we can fight. I have no reason why in the middle of a game he would yell at me, 'Do you want to fight?'" A referee challenging a star player to a fistfight was unprecedented. Commissioner David Stern acted swiftly. He suspended Joey Crawford for the remainder of the season, including the entire playoffs. This ended Crawford's 21-year streak of officiating the NBA Finals. The financial cost was over $100,000. Duncan was fined $25,000. But the disparity in punishment told the real story. Critically, Stern mandated that Crawford seek professional psychiatric help before reinstatement. The commissioner diagnosed the referee with an anger management problem. Crawford later admitted the incident saved his career and possibly his life. In a 2012 interview, Crawford said, "The Duncan thing probably changed my life. I had seen a sports psychologist before that, but after, I saw him a lot more. It gave me a new perspective." The incident became a case study in sports psychology. The irony is perfect. Even when Tim Duncan was the center of a major controversy, he was the passive actor. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't scream profanity. He simply existed. And his calm demeanor was so infuriating to Crawford that it caused a psychological break. The incident isn't remembered as a stain on Duncan's record. It's proof of his psychological dominance. He could dismantle an opponent or a referee without lifting a finger. His silence and laughter were more insulting than any scream because they signaled a complete lack of intimidation. Tim Duncan retired in 2016 without a farewell tour. He released a short statement. He declined a press conference. He walked away. To the casual observer, this was the final act of the boring legend. But that boring persona was a survival mechanism. Tim Duncan was not boring. He was composed. There's a distinct difference. A boring man doesn't get swindled out of $20 million and then stand in federal court to ensure justice is served. A boring man doesn't navigate a high-stakes divorce during an NBA Finals run. A boring man doesn't drive a veteran referee to therapy simply by smiling. The scandal of Tim Duncan is that he experienced the full spectrum of human betrayal and chaos, but refused to let it define him. He absorbed the blows, financial, emotional, and reputational. He kept his dignity when his bank account was looted. He kept his silence when his marriage was tabloid fodder. He kept his cool when a referee challenged him to a fight. The positive angle isn't that Duncan was perfect. It's that he was unbreakable. unbreakable? The death hoax is false, but the boring myth is also false. Tim Duncan is very much alive, and his life has been a quiet, intense, and triumphant battle against chaos. The fact that the world still thinks he's boring is perhaps his greatest achievement of all. It means he won. He protected the only thing that mattered to him, his peace. If you respect that kind of strength, hit hype one more time. This is what real greatness looks like.